Welcome to 10 of the Best, where I list 10 of the best classics from the past. Pretty simple stuff. Let's do it. It's a beautiful game, or at least it used to be before billions of pounds meant that only a handful of teams could win the top competitions, and the biggest clubs became victims of their own greed, beholden to the financial whims of their owners become masters. Back when a starting 11 wasn't a selection of pre-programmed tactical mercenary rich boys, who weren't better at kicking a ball but could run faster for longer than their peers, there were all kinds of great games released representing what football once was. Some focused on the frenetic on-the-pitch action, others focused on the running and management of a club. Here are 10 of the best, with only one title per series allowed. 10. Actua Soccer. After Virtua Striker produced stunning 3D graphics in the arcades, Gremlin Interactive decided to one-up them with Actua Soccer. A fully 3D footy game with real motion capture from professional footballers and superb commentary from the incomparable Barry Davis. It was a superb leap forward in technology, and with its multiple camera angles and professional presentation it lay down the gauntlet for future franchise players, whose previous titles had been left in a lower division altogether. Sure, it's not going to wow you these days, but the arcade style still makes for an entertaining game of two halves. Number 9. Premier Manager 3. Unlikely to feature in other lists online, Premier Manager 3 is the perfect distillation of the early 90s graphical-based icon-driven management sims. You start from the bottom and work your way up with a full match engine and a now standard Premier Manager interface polished to a reflective sheen after 3 attempts. Everything is improved from its predecessor, and the deluxe edition boasts a comprehensive editor. It's just a shame that this was the last management title on PC for original programmer John Atkinson. Number 8. Kickoff II. You know those top-down camera angles you get in football games? You can blame Dino Dini for popularising that. The football game maestro revolutionised the control scheme of the players by treating the ball as a separate object that didn't just stick to their feet. This allowed for rampant arcade-style top-down action, the likes of which had never been seen before. Heralded as an utter classic for the Amiga, Kickoff II polarised players with its high skill ceiling, proving wondrous for some and utterly uncontrollable for others. 30 years on from its release, players are still congregating for the annual Kickoff II World Cup, a bigger endorsement of the game's quality than any words I could offer. Number 7. Ultimate Soccer Manager 2. Impressions Games took the defunct Premier Manager formula and updated it for the late 90s, continuing its intriguing first-person interface and allowing you to jump from office to office and sporting a less statistical and more fast-paced style of management compared to its direct competitors. The most intriguing aspect of this though, you could bribe people, bet on matches, and even rig things. This unscrupulous and unethical behaviour was rarely seen in the genre, and made the title stand out even more. But really it's just sandwiched between 2 other titles in this list, because number 6. Goal. It almost feels like cheating, listing what is essentially Kickoff free by any other name. Dino Dini took his tried and tested Amiga formula and tweaked and improved upon it even further, including much welcome multiple camera angles and better ball physics. Unfortunately, it would be Dini's last PC football game for almost 25 years, as by this point a certain other top-down footy title had appeared. Dini's number was called, and much to the disbelief of the fans, he was subbed off. Number 5. FIFA 98. Like the ebb and flow of tides and the vitriolic arguments in comments sections on social media, a FIFA game appearing on this list was inevitable. After the fear of Actua Soccer forced EA into the 3D world with FIFA Soccer 96, and subsequent competition led to the increasing refinements in FIFA Soccer 97, it was with FIFA Road to World Cup 98 that the series went nova. To this day, FIFA 98 is considered one of the greatest sports games of all time, featuring every single FIFA international team, and a huge number of fully licensed players, a licensed soundtrack that was wonderful, and Motti and Andy Gray in their primes on commentary. What this meant was that you could finally live out your dream of qualifying and then winning the World Cup as Northern Ireland. You could also play in 11 different leagues with 189 club teams represented, And of course there was still the incredible indoor mode, as well as a built-in editor and transfer system, so you could keep your teams up to date or simply stick Ronaldo up front for Manchester United like my cousin did on his PlayStation. It was the perfect marriage of fast-paced arcade action and unparalleled realism for the time, but its time has been and gone, and it's an absolute pain to get the PC version working, and I certainly wouldn't trust EA to attempt a remaster. Number 4. Football Manager 2005. 2005 is the cutoff point for what I deem to be classic football games. It's also when Roman Abramovich spent $300 million in the transfer market over the course of 2 seasons to make his newly acquired Chelsea champions of England, 10 times the amount of his nearest rival's Arsenal. Around this time, Sports Interactive, the developers of Championship Manager, had a falling out with their previous publisher Eidos, and subsequently lost both the iconic name and the publishing contract. What they didn't lose, however, was the source code for their game. After having a curry with the CEO of Sega, like you do, Football Manager became a thing, and the rest is history, with the inaugural entry becoming the 5th fastest selling game of all time, and the series single-handedly decimating every other football management sim since. Football Manager is a gigantic football database, masquerading as a game. You're put in charge of everything, you can tweak just about every stat, and the pace of the game and level of micromanagement means that obsessives will spend thousands of hours living in this bizarre alternate universe. Each iteration has tweaked and altered things, but the core game remains the same, a vastly more detailed version of their previous Championship Manager series, which, funnily enough, hasn't been mentioned on this list yet. Number 3.
Pro Evolution Soccer 5.
When people ask me what my most played game of all time is, they're usually expecting some old DOS RPG like Might Magic 2 or Daggerfall to be the obvious answer. Instead, it's a game from 2005 released on the original Xbox. Remember that Abramovich side I was talking about before? Well, team captain John Terry features on the cover, staring down then rival Thierry Henry. Money talks, and Konami paid a pretty penny to get some licensed teams involved. The game itself is an improvement on the 4th game in the series in every way, and since Pro Evolution Soccer 4 was one of the better football games ever released, this makes 5 arguably the best distillation of classic arcade football ever. But what was it that made it so good? Aside from the fact that on the pitch it played a fantastic game, the key is in the name. Evolution, meaning that with experience and training your players would grow and develop over time in the unlicensed Master League mode. You could take a team of no-hopers, bolster it with youth players and savvy signings and watch as they blossomed into career professionals, or even world-class performers over the course of a few seasons. It was a marriage of management sim and league mode that had never been done quite as well, and it blew competitor FIFA out of the water, who soon scrambled to implement their own version of these changes. Sure, they didn't have all the player names and leagues and obscure teams like earlier FIFA titles did, but the combination of wonderful on-the-field moments coupled with watching a team blossom under your stewardship changed the genre forever. Number 2.
Goal-scoring superstar hero.
Sensible World of Soccer. I prefer Pro Evo 5 to Sensi. There, I said it. So why is it number 2 on this list? Well, even I can acknowledge that it's the perfect arcade football game, designed for those old red-top joysticks and sporting a single button for everything. The formula that Dino Dini introduced was taken by Sensible Software and turned into a mega hit on the Amiga, eventually being named the best game ever for the system. Stanford University included it in their 10 most important games of all time for a reason, and that's because almost 30 years after the fact there still isn't a better top-down football game. Much like inspirational predecessor Kickoff II, Sensi is still played annually in tournaments, sporting a full career management mode years before the likes of FIFA and Pro Evo. It allowed you to play 20 seasons with its own brand of management sim, on top of either fully controlling your team or choosing to simulate matches. While it's easy to jump into a match and kick the ball about, you'll soon discover that the learning curve is enormous, with contextually sensitive joystick movements determining what your players do with that single button press. Also worth noting is there's been a recent fan remaster of the game. If you're like me and never mastered the finer intricacies of Sensi, that's fine. Dust yourself off and give it another try. With enough practice and patience, you'll go from a hoofer of the ball to a goal-scoring superstar hero. Number 1. Championship Manager 2001-2002. There's a certain type of football game fan, usually British, probably in their 30s to 50s in age, who will tell you unequivocally that the football management sim was perfected in 1999 by the Sports Interactive team, and every release from them since has added unnecessary bloat that has slowed the game down. Now, given the rampant success that is Football Manager, you'll be forgiven for dismissing this as the nostalgia-soaked ramblings of a fool. Except this particular management sim is still being played and updated to this day. Annual releases of Championship Manager had become commonplace by this point, with seasonal updates and a few tweaks here and there. Every few years, the Sports Interactive team would introduce a new interface, and the number would increase. So Championship Manager 0102 is the final seasonal update for Championship Manager 3 on the PC, before the company moved on to Championship Manager 4. With over 25,000 players in-game, there was an unparalleled level of involvement that also led me to discover just how comprehensive the game could be. You see, Championship Manager's database was so vast that it included people that I had played football with, and who had subsequently turned professional or semi-professional in the Northern Irish leagues. That was absolutely mind-boggling to come across 20 years ago, and something that has been taken for granted in the years since. So why is this beloved classic held in higher regard than Football Manager by so many? Well, unlike the intense micromanagement of the latter, you could blast your way through a season far quicker in Championship Manager. The increasing complexity of Football Manager was a turn-off for many fans, who didn't want to have to spend forever tweaking and altering things in hope that they'd make a slight difference after kickoff commenced. Championship Manager is the perfect game for many, allowing for a deep database and an enormous level of club customization, but not so much that it seems excessive and bogs down the gameplay. And fan efforts to update and improve the game have been so successful that IDOS themselves, upon releasing the game as freeware, recommended that players download the fan patch from champman0102.net. And that's what football is really about, the fans. And no other game has received quite the fan attention as this one has. So while we now live in a corporate world where a handful of billionaires control everything, yes, I'm still talking about football, you can still go back and play those footy games from yesteryear and remember fondly what a beautiful game it used to be.